Senior Fellow at the Middle East Institute on Palestinian and Israeli Affairs, and joins me now live from Washington. Khaled, we've seen several days of continuing violence between Palestinians and Israelis. The situation is clearly very tense. How big is the risk of the situation spiralling out of control?
Well, I think we're beyond that now. I think it's already spiraling out of control. There is nothing to constrain Israel. I think it's important to remind people that there is an enormous power imbalance between these two sides. So when we talk about violence between Israelis and Palestinians, Israel is one of the most powerful militaries in the world. It is the occupying power. It rules the lives of 5 million Palestinians. Who of course, have no say in the government that rules over them. And so Israel is beginning to now unleash some of its large-scale weapons, Apache helicopters, and even airstrikes, the first airstrike in the West Bank since 2005. At the very same time that radical Israeli settlers are rampaging through Palestinian towns and villages. And so at this point, there is no force on the ground that can protect Palestinians, which is not the case for Israelis, of course, who have a very sophisticated military.
You said there is no constraints on the Israeli government. What about third parties? What about the US? Joe Biden's made it very clear that he is frustrated by Israel's plans to expand on settlements. Is there any prospect of the US taking more direct action to rein in Israel?
I don't think so. I think what we've seen from the Biden administration over the past 2.5 years is a lot of statements, a lot of expressions of concern. Sometimes they're deeply concerned. Sometimes they're looking into the matter, but there are no consequences. There is no direct action that is taken, even though the United States has considerable leverage over Israel. It provides almost $4 billion a year in military support. But there really isn't much appetite in the Biden administration to get deeply involved in this issue. And one of the consequences that we're seeing from that neglect is that it is spiraling out of control.
Khaled, the most recent example of violence is an Israeli drone attack, which has killed 3 Palestinians in a car. We don't know who were on board, but that drone attack, we've got pictures of that now being shown. The Israeli army said it's identified a terrorist cell and therefore launched a drone attack. Can I ask you, again, when we're talking about an international response to what Israel is doing, what about Arab nations? I mean, these are the nations that Israel professes to want normalized ties with. What could they be doing, or should they be doing something?
Well, certainly, I think all third parties could and should be doing more than they are. I think there's a lot of frustration in the Arab capitals. I think there's even some embarrassment on the part of those who have normalized with Israel and are now distancing themselves from that relationship in some ways, like Morocco, for example, recently canceled this Negev forum that would include Israel and other countries in the region to talk about security. And so it's not a good time for Arab states to cozy up to Israel. But other than issue statements and condemnations, we're not seeing much from the Arab states either. The reality is that no one seems to have any appetite for investing in any kind of long-term conflict mitigation or conflict resolution in this issue. That has usually fallen to the United States, but right now the United States is more or less content to sit on the sidelines.
Can I ask you one last question? The UN's Middle East envoy is urging both sides to re-engage on a political path. I mean, given that we are going to see undoubtedly new settler homes and the expansions of settlement to the point where the occupied West Bank is going to have many more settlements, is there even a political path to engage on anymore?
No, there isn't. I mean, there hasn't been for almost a decade any sort of political or diplomatic process. It's unclear, with the U.S. when the UN envoy says something along those lines. It's not clear what that means. How does one go about building a diplomatic process between Israel and a government that is committed not just to de facto annexation of the West Bank, but is actually moving towards de jure, officially and legally annexing the West Bank by transferring authorities from military to civilian entities in the government. And they are openly opposed to a two-state solution, and in fact are committed to the vision of Greater Israel. There isn't really anything to negotiate on that basis. And then, of course, on the other side, you have a Palestinian leadership that is weak, that is lost legitimacy in the eyes of the Palestinian people, and that is losing control on the ground. And so we are watching the end of the two-state solution before our very eyes, and there's very little response from the international community other than kind of repeating these old talking points that seem utterly disconnected from reality.
Khaled, good to speak with you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Khaled Elgindy there in Washington, D.C.